Hey, I'm Daniel Dekay, and I am on my way back from Guelph, Ontario, where I had the pleasure of spending the day with Canadian thrash icon Dave Carlo from Razor. We spent the day talking about their brand new record, Cycle of Contempt, their first in 25 years. He indulged me in some old school Razor tales, and I learned that no matter how many times life tried to knock him down, he always got back up stronger than ever and never gave up on music. Dave, thank you so much for having us over.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I've been listening to music my whole life, but this isn't just a legacy interview. We're actually here because Razor has new music. The first record in 25 years, Cycle of Contempt, out on Relapse Records. I got to ask right off the top, why now? What is the driving factor for this to happen now as opposed to any time in the last 25 years?
Right. Well, we last did an album in '97. That album was called Decibels. And that wasn't even really an official Razor album because the band wasn't active at that time. We didn't start to get active again until the early 2000s. And that was because of the internet. People were able to download music and we were being rediscovered and discovered for the first time by younger people. Just saw the audience growing enough to the point where we decided we needed to do a new album. We decided that about 5 years ago. And, mainly because of the pandemic and some of the other commitments we had, it just took us this line to get there.
I mean, you talk about, some of the motivating factors to, decide to put together a record ultimately as you start playing more shows and you see that the fans are loving it and the fans are coming out and the fans are hungry for more music. But I found it really interesting that in interviews you've also said that you first and foremost wrote this album to please yourself. A lot of bands, succumb to outside pressure from fans to recreate a certain era or to recreate a feeling. But for you, it was very important to do this for yourself after not doing an album for so long. Can you dive into that a little bit for me?
Yes, absolutely. I am a metal fan. So when we talk about the fan base, I'm part of the fan base. And I'm a fan of all forms of metal, although thrash metal is definitely my favorite. And so when I write the albums, if I please myself, I please the audience, I think, for the most part. The albums that are the favorites of our fans, the favorite Razor albums, are my favorite Razor albums. So I feel like if I am the person who is enjoying the music, then most of my audience is going to be there too.
It's really cool to hear you say that your favorite records are the fans' favorite records because a lot of people will, feed you the bullshit lines that the latest record is our best record or, always that. But, I think that it's good to be a fan of your own music and aware of where the strengths lie in a long career with a lot of output.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, I'm trying to reserve my opinion on the new material a little bit because I think a little time has to pass before you can really put it in perspective. But I do feel that this is the best work we've ever done. And I think one of the main reasons for that is just because there was more time put into this. We didn't have the constraints we used to have. So we were able to get the performances we wanted out of everybody on this record. So I do think it's our best work. But time will tell historically whether it's going to be considered a classic or not. I've heard from a few people who think it already is, and that's really, really gratifying to hear. But like I say, we'll wait and see how that pans out.
I'd love to dive into this idea of timeline and time constraints and budget because a lot's changed since you did your last record, I'm sure, too, with studio styles and technology and the flow of things. Can you talk to me about the differences then putting together a record and now putting together a record?
Well, one of the main differences from my standpoint is I'm certainly a lot more knowledgeable than I used to be on how to use recording gear. Nowadays we have so many more tools available to us, and you don't have to spend the same kind of money you used to have to get the sound that the big boys do. You get these purist guys. It's a small handful of guys who go on about, we need to sound like we did back in 1985. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. I got news for you. I'm not going to sound like I did in 1985 for a bunch of reasons. Reason number one is I'm a much better musician than I was back then. I got 40 years more of experience. Secondly, we also don't plan on using the analog equipment that we had back then. I mean, that to me sounds ridiculous. We made a very raw album here, and I did not overproduce it. I went out of my way to make sure that we didn't put too many ingredients in there, because that's one thing that I think is you have to be careful of these days. is not to overproduce, not to over EQ stuff, not to over effect stuff, just because you can, right? Or you find an effect that you think is cool and then you just use it to death and then it just wrecks the entire vibe of the recording. So we're very raw. I tried to keep it very raw and very honest so that we can reproduce the sound live.
Another interesting thing about the writing for Cycle of Contempt, track sequencing. You do something on this album that is a bit of a lost art. You wrote this record for vinyl in the sense that it's 6 songs on side A and 6 songs on side B. Can you talk to me about the importance and the thought process in creating an album for vinyl?
I always liked having a side 1 and side 2. Plus, it's nice to have a little intermission, especially on an album like a Razor album, because a Razor album is so like this, all the time.
Yeah.
So it's nice to give people a little intermission there. My first song on each side has to be an impact song. I could have kicked the album off with the first song on side 2, The Cycle of Contempt. The title track could have been the first song, but we have Flames of Hatred. Both of those are interchangeable. I could have switched them over, and I kind of like to lay it out that way.
It's like if the two labels look similar, it's a dark room and you don't know which side is A and which side is B, like no matter what you do, you're going to put it on to an amazing first song to kick off a side of an album.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool, Another band that did that a lot when I was younger, I remember, I always thought AC/DC took a lot of care with the way they laid out their tracks for vinyl too. And so maybe I've just got influenced by them for that.
The artwork for this record is really cool, especially if you're, a diehard Razor fan. There's some imagery on the album that we recognize. There's, some recurring themes, a little bit of an homage to some past album covers. Tell me about what we're looking at there.
Well, yeah, that's my buddy from the Shotgun Justice album. He returns for Cycle of Contempt. He's grown his hair long on one side because he is a metal guy. We thought we wanted to bring him back. He's dressed the exact same way as on Shotgun Justice. He may be in the future, he'll be like our Eddie or something. But he's using one of my guitars, one of my Aria Urchin guitars.
It's not just any guitar on there, man. That's your Evil Invader's guitar.
Yes,
That's the guitar, man. That was like the first visual I ever had of Razor was that video, man.
Yeah.
That guitar's legendary.
They get all moved around. Oh, here we go. There she is.
Oh, there it is. Like, these guitars are so unique. How many of these do you have?
I've got at least half a dozen, I think. Yeah. I got a few of them. I love them. You know what is cool about them is they look cool and I feel good in my hands. They just feel good in my hands. It's just for me anyway, right? I've played a whole bunch of different guitars and lots of them feel good, but these ones there's something about them that I just know my way around them,
And this is legit. This is the one you've had since...
No, that's the 84. That's the one that was in the Evil Invaders video. That's the only one I have that's got this subburst, yeah.
We have a new record, and that's really awesome. But I would be doing a huge injustice if I got to sit here with you and we didn't talk a little bit of history.
Sure.
You did, in fact, play legs of tours with both Motorhead, Venom, and you did Slayer as well.
Yeah.
Are there any standout memories that might be entertaining to reminisce on for a moment about either of those experiences?
We went into Larry's Hideaway, the first show we did with Slayer, and we were the only people in there because they were doing sound check, and they played for about 45 more minutes while we just stood there, and they played all of the songs off High in the Chapel. They played 3 or 4 songs off Hell Awaits, which hadn't come out and wasn't coming out for another 5 or 6 months. So we heard Kill Again, and we heard Praise of Death. They were playing these in my face, just me and the other 2 guys in Razor. Nobody else in the place. Private audience with Slayer at that time when they were really, in my view, their absolute best. And it just was mind-blowing for me because it made me rethink everything about songwriting and about what I thought about metal because I had never witnessed such amazing heaviness in my face like that and realizing, okay, I don't think you can be more ferocious on a stage than these guys are being right now. It's just relentless on a level I can't even put into words. And then, of course, when we met them, they were nice guys. Like, for example, Dave Lombardo they were jamming and we got ready. And just as a matter of course, we started setting up our gear in front of Slayer. And Dave Lombardo came out. He had just gotten off the stage. He was covered in sweat. He says, "What are you guys doing?" Well, we're setting our gear up. He goes, No. You go up there. And he pointed to the drum riser where his drums were. He goes, "I'll take my drums down. You're not going to go there." And we couldn't believe it. If you don't think they're cool for that, let me tell you what else they did. When we played with them and Venom, well, there wasn't enough room for all 3 bands at the concert hall. Embro played Lombardo's kit. He just said, "You play my drums." That's what Dave said. So, do you think I like Dave Lombardo? A little bit. I think he's a fucking gentleman. Okay. And I think the guys at Slayer are gentlemen. Okay. They were all cool to us.
That's awesome. I've heard you talk before about that you turned down an offer from Metal Blade to go with Attic, the Canadian label, and that in hindsight that was probably a big mistake. Can you kind of paint a broader picture for me about, you know, the struggles of being a Canadian band playing aggressive music in that era?
The scene in Canada was different than it was in Europe and the U.S. What happened in the States and in the the European countries was they were discovering that more extreme forms of metal had an audience. Labels like Metal Blade and Megaforce, they were starting to develop metal bands and take it seriously. Whereas here in Canada, we had agents, management, radio stations, the whole establishment just didn't get it. They didn't get it. They laughed at bands like Slayer. They laughed at bands like Metallica in the early days. And of course, they didn't have any use for a band like Razor. We were just too heavy.
Was the issue just the industry in Canada and the lack of infrastructure, or in general were the shows here not anywhere at the level that the shows you guys were doing overseas and in the United States?
Well, the shows that we played here were fantastic, and the fan base was fantastic. Canadian metal fans were just like everybody else. They loved metal the same way. The people were there, but the problem was the people that control booking the venues and manage the bands, they were stuck in this early 80s hair metal vibe. The only kind of metal they wanted to hear about was that hair metal stuff, that glam kind of thing.
Sunset Strip
like
metal.
The Motley Crue kind of deal, right? They were looking for the pretty boys. They weren't interested in the guys who were playing like this heavier underground flavor of metal. I'm going to say something here too, because I mean this is a guy who I really do like. Alexander Mayer, Al Mayer, the president of Attic Records. Al was talking about us to somebody, and he said, "Oh, you know, we had Razor. They only sold a couple thousand albums, so that's why we didn't do anything with them." Because I guess people ask Al now, "Why didn't you do more for Razor?" Well, you know, Al, we didn't get the help, Al. Come on, Al. You could have done more for us. You didn't understand. Just admit it. You didn't understand, Al. I like you very much, Al. You're a principled guy and you tried to help us, but you didn't understand. That's a difference.
Yeah, seriously, that's exactly great insight on that. Before we move on to some other stuff, I want to talk a little, more history of the band. Fans have a way of clinging on to eras of bands, and with Razor, it's the same case with a lot of people clinging on to Stace, clinging on to Sheepdog. Mm-hmm. Brave Words kind of tracked him down and did an interview with him unbeknownst to you, and Stace said some shit. Can you tell me a little bit about, Sheepdog and that 2014 situation and kind of where that left things between you and him?
What bothered me was there was an insinuation that he had been cheated somehow. And he certainly hadn't been cheated by me or by anybody in the band. That was a bit of an issue for me. When you question my integrity or my honesty and stuff, then that's where I get a little bit salty. The truth is, the guy was in my band for 4 years. I loved the job he did. I thought he was a great singer. We had fun. We had fun for 4 years. And I got to tell you, I don't remember conflicts in those days. There was no fighting. We didn't fight about anything. So I think he might have been holding a whole bunch of shit in that he never told us. And then all of a sudden he went off on this Brave Words interview. That's fine if that's how he felt. But he certainly didn't share it with us at the time. And maybe if he had, maybe some things would have been different. Because the truth is, I wrote the album Custom Killing. The fourth Razor album was written for him at his urging me to go down that road, that direction. That's what he wanted. So at least that proves I'm not a completely inflexible asshole. I was willing to listen to what he had to say, but he didn't have a lot to say back then. I mean, he was mostly about going to shows and meeting people, having people buy him drinks and looking for women. That was his thing. He just went out and he was that guy. He was the guy. And we didn't bust his balls that he wasn't helping with anything business oriented because, all right, he's the sheepdog. Go be the sheepdog and get your ass kissed and do all the things you like to do. You don't need to rag on me about shit. I'm not going to say I'm in a feud with anybody because some people like to use the word feud. There's no feuds, guys. I ain't got time in my life for fucking feuds.
Well, as I said, people always cling to pieces of history and, what they knew when they were younger. And
well, I get it. I'm a fan of bands like Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden. To me, the only singer of Iron Maiden should be Paul Di'Anno.
There you go.
For me, the only singer for Black Sabbath is Ozzy Osbourne. So I get it. Okay, I understand it. But that doesn't mean I don't like what Ian Gillan did with Black Sabbath. Bottom line is that you can like the other singers too. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You can like both.
People look at you From a fan perspective, people might have no idea about any of the, personal struggles. They see a rock star on stage. They might not even know what you're encountering in that moment. For example, your battle with Stargardt's dystrophy. Can you tell me about what that is, first and foremost, and the effect it's had on your musical career?
Well, it started in 1997, but I noticed one day my right eye was funny because I was trying to look at a digital clock in my house and I couldn't see the time. And I didn't understand why I couldn't see it. Then I turned and I saw it much better. So then I covered one eye and it looked good. And I covered the other eye and the numbers were gone. And I was like, what? What the hell's going on? One of my eyes isn't working. So then I had to get it checked. A whole bunch of tests. They injected dye into my eyes and everything. There's all kinds of stuff they were doing. And they told me that I had this condition called Stargardt's dystrophy, right? That was probably going to happen to my other eye too. And that's an awful thought. When you've already lost vision in one eye, you've still got one good eye, so everything's still pretty much the same in your life. And then when they say you're going to lose the other eye, you start thinking, oh my God, when's that going to happen, right? Well, sure enough, within 5 years, right? By 2002, I started to notice the left eye started to go. Once they started to go, it only took about 6 months for it to go from just a beginning of a problem to completely got nothing there. So I have no central vision, which means when I look directly at something, I can't see it. So what I have to do is I have to use my peripheral vision to see things. And the worst part of it is that when I'm watching my audience, I can't see my audience having a good time anymore. And I used to love that. I used to love seeing people enjoy our show, and I can't see that anymore. And then, of course, that presents another issue with how do I play guitar, right? So I have glow-in-the-dark tape that I put on the frets of my guitars. And, I've got an example of... There you go. So we've got here is, we've got glow-in-the-dark tape. And what I do is I put all the fret positions and I hit it with ultraviolet light. And it glows for a couple of hours. And it's beautiful. And it helps me on stage. I can always see where I am on the frets. So that does that for me. I've adapted.
I mean, to me, what's really inspiring about it is that it seems like it's seamless. As I say, like a fan could watch you on stage and probably literally has no idea that you have vision loss. When it first happened, like, was there ever a moment in your life where you thought that you were never going to be able to play guitar again? Like, did these kind of like grim thoughts come across your mind?
You always have those feelings at first when you get told of something like you're going to lose your eyesight. You start to worry, okay, well, what is this that's happening and why is it happening? And I was assured, though, at the time it happened, that it doesn't affect your peripheral vision. They said you'll always have your peripheral vision. You'll always be able to walk around in a 3D environment and not bump into things. If you're on a stage, though, you might want them to tape off the areas of the stage that you could walk off the stage, because that could happen, right?
You've never had like a onstage accident because of not being able to see where you're going?
I did have one thing happen to me, and that was this guy in Oakland, California, got on stage at California Death Fest, and I guess he didn't know I was blind. And he just charged and he hit me and he bowled me right into the drums. No. I went flying back into the drums. And then we made an announcement like, hey man, guitar player can't see. So if you guys are going to get up on stage and mosh or whatever, you need to be aware of that.
You've also had some family issues to deal with. Tell me about raising two children with special needs, both very unique of each other in their own way.
Yep. Mm-hmm. It's defined my life. My life is defined by a lot of obstacles been put in the way. So starting off with losing my eyesight, but, we had my son in 1999 and he is autistic. We had my daughter and she has three things. She has OCD, which is my issue as well. She has ADHD, as does my son, by the way. The last one is borderline personality disorder, which we most recently all heard from Amber Heard was diagnosed with that. Well, my daughter's nothing like Amber Heard. The truth is that my daughter has some real serious feelings that she has to contend with on a given day, and some of them are very antisocial, and it's tough because she's been raised in a very loving environment, and it's a good thing she has been, because a person who has these conditions that hasn't got a loving environment would have a real tough time on this planet. Same thing with autistic people. If you don't raise them in a loving environment, understanding environment, they're going to have a real tough time. Now, one thing my wife and I did, we always wanted our kids, and we treated them that way, and they were raised with a lot of gratitude and appreciation for who they are, however they turn out, right? But unfortunately, I just lost my wife. My wife just died. She just died 2 weeks ago. But she had cancer for the last 2 years. She's been fighting cancer for 2 years. So she fought hard for 2 years, and it's been really tough here because losing their mother is really something they didn't need. That's a massive, massive sucker punch to lose your mother when you have the issues you're already dealing with. So they're dealing with that, and we're just trying to now pick up the pieces from what we've been through. Yeah,
it's inspiring to see, you know, that no matter what hand you've been dealt, personal level, you yourself being a cancer survivor, it's inspiring to me that you don't let up at all, that you're sitting here with me right now and we're talking about, you know, a new album and future plans. Like, Dave, it's incredibly inspiring. I mean, I have to wonder, was there ever a moment where you yourself were at wit's end, or, you know, ready to quit music, or, you know, ready to just change, you know, your life completely?
the funny thing is, with all those things I just described to you, I forgot about my own cancer that I had. So much crap has come at us that, you know, it doesn't even get on the radar that I had cancer in 2012. I had 20% of my tongue removed. You wouldn't know it to hear me talk now. Plus, if you look, you can see my neck scar where they did the neck dissection surgery. Did I ever think about quitting or not doing the music? No, we didn't, because I really do love this music, and music for me is not just about, you know, being like doing it as a career. It's a passion. It's, for me, it's about love of being a musician, of playing. Yeah.
Furthermore than it just being like a true passion and a true love, has music served as that outlet for, you know, those frustrations?
No, working on Cycle during my wife's illness, right? Those sessions were wonderful for me. Those were therapeutic, to be able to just detach. Sometimes you wouldn't believe the weight that you feel come off you just from not thinking about the negative stuff that's going on. Just to go and do the music and only focus on the music is just such pleasure, to just be able to do that, and not even, and then when you get done, and then you have to go back to thinking about your wife is sick and you have to help her. You know, it's you realize the value of the time off just to make the music.
And I mean, that's really why we're here today, is, you know, it's Cycle of Contempt. It's more than just 12 new songs. It's got such a deeper meaning to it, and it was created in such, you know, an important time in your life when there was so many things going on. I'm really excited for anyone who hasn't heard the whole record yet to listen to it and to now hear your words and where it comes from and who you are as a person, and to see that in your first release in 25 years. This is a huge moment for the band and for you, and I'm really thankful for the time and the openness you've given me today. This has been absolutely inspiring anytime I talk to you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And, you know, I look forward to seeing you again soon. And we'll get together with Exciter and we'll do some shows.
Absolutely. Hell yeah, man.